All right, we've gone through my pet peeves, formatting. We've looked at messaging, concepting, directing. Now it's time to look at the orange cards, tip number 43 through 52, and that would be directing. So for those of you who are directing talent, let me give you my tips. Some of which you may not appreciate, but I'm going to give them to you anyway. Tip number 43, too many cooks. Too many cooks in the kitchen. I don't know how many times I've been in a session where, and I'm just reading, I'm just a voiceover talent, and there have been 5 or 8 people on the line. And I just bring this tip up to say, just be careful, because sometimes too many cooks spoils the soup, so to speak, if that's the expression. And the commercials get overcooked, they get overdone, and they kind of turn out lousy. So when you're recording, make sure somebody is the director and maintains the integrity of the spot. So I understand why there's lots of cooks. I know sometimes the client's got to be on the line, and sometimes the agency creative director, and sometimes the producer, and sometimes the copywriter, but be careful. Tip number 44 is go to a studio. Go to a studio. And really what this tip should mean, don't sound like you're not in a studio. Because I have heard commercials on the radio where it sounds like they've recorded it in a garage, and there's a purpose for garages. Garage bands can use garages, but not for radio commercials. Now, I will say there have been times I've been stuck, and I've been in a hotel room in Virginia and recorded things on my phone and made it work. And I've had to do some things acoustically to make it work. But for all intents and purposes, make sure that you sound like you're professional and you sound like you're in a studio, unless you're perhaps trying to sound like you're on location. But that's tip number 44, go to a studio. Tip number 45, record together. Anytime you have the opportunity to record together, side by side, at least in the same facility. Sometimes you might be in isolated rooms, but you're not dealing with ISDN or Source Connect delay or phone delay. Anytime you can do it in the studio together, ultimately your timing can be better. Especially if it's a dialogue, nuanced kind of a read and you're layering things, it's very hard to do those when you're isolated. Now, that said, it can be done. It's more difficult. I did one the other day where one of the actors I use, Elizabeth, was on the phone and I was on the phone and we recorded separately and I brought it together and I made it work. And it can be done, but that would have not been our preference. Tip number 46 is pay for chemistry. Pay for chemistry. Sometimes it costs a little extra to get the right actors. Years ago, I was in New York and I was producing a commercial for Maxwell House, and it was a cattle call and people coming in and auditioning, and there were 2 guys that came in and I went, gosh, these guys look familiar. Well, they had been on like an A1 steak sauce commercial and an Alka-Seltzer commercial, and those 2 guys together were phenomenal. They were just... Now, granted, they read a 30-second spot in 36. They took a little extra time and did some ad-libs, but they were phenomenal, and it was worth paying extra, scale and a half or double scale, to get them. So think about that. It's worth it sometimes. The money that you're paying for chemistry is worth it. Tip number 47 is break the rules. I used to call this ignore the punctuation. A lot of times I'll tell actors, you see the punctuation in the script, I want you to just ignore it. Or I want you to have the liberty to put new punctuation in, or repeat words, or slow something down, or speed something up. At your liberty. I like to give them that freedom because many times that makes it sound that much more natural. So that's kind of an actor's tip. Encourage them to kind of break the rules, do what feels right for them. Because if you go back to listening to what real dialogue sounds like, they're breaking rules all the time. All right, tip number 48, let them act. Before you end your session, I usually just try to say, and I like it when somebody says it to me, is there a way you'd like to do it? Just do it your way. No time restraint, no script restraint, just do what feels right to you and feels good to you. And I may not use the particular take, but they'll do something in that one take that's just brilliant, and I'll pull it out and edit it in. So I always try to give my actors the freedom to just let them act. Sometimes I got to give them line reads. We're all used to that. But I also like to give them the freedom to be creative and ad-lib. Tip number 49. I'll bring in my Mr. Potato Head cheesy prop. because tip number 49 is avoid the monsters. Avoid the monsters. I've produced, as voice talent, scripts where somebody's given me an Excel spreadsheet and they've taken it line by line, done it 3 in a row, line by line, and they've tried to put it together and make it sound natural and right. And the reality is Frankensteining a spot, as we like to call it, it can break the flow. So at least begin the session with giving the actors the opportunity to at least go through the whole spot once by themselves without a break, and then go back and pick things up if you want. But be careful of Frankensteins. Be careful of Mr. Potato Heads that are all mixed up, and avoid those monsters. All right, let's look at tip number 50, 51, and 52. We're almost done. Tip number 50 is score the music. In this day and age, it's pretty cost-effective to come up with custom scores. I've got people that I work with, a couple in particular, that almost any time I need an original score, I'll call on them and they'll put it together in a couple of days, if not sooner. It's very economical, and sometimes perfect music makes the spot perfect. So anytime you have the opportunity and it works, and you don't be afraid to customize the music and score something specifically for that radio commercial. Tip number 51, I'm going to hold off on. We're going to do that at the end because that might get me into trouble. Tip number 52 is take a test drive. Take it for a test drive. Used to be that I would be in the studio and I would throw it on a cassette tape and drive it around in the car and listen to the mix. And then, of course, I'd do CDs, and now I put it on my phone, because if it's a mix where music is important and sound effects are important, I want to make sure all of those cut through the clutter and the road noise. So take it for a test drive. That's the best way to make sure that the mix is right. Tip number 51 is no waiting, please. If you're directing a radio commercial, I think there's some common etiquette that, how should I say this? You don't make the talent just wait and wait and wait and sit around while you try to figure something out or you try to edit something together. To me, that sounds like you're not prepared. It seems like you're not prepared or you're unprofessional. I did a commercial the other day. It was a 30-second spot. I think I did 8 takes, and then I sat and waited for about an hour and a half before I was cleared to go. And it was because they didn't know what they wanted, and they didn't really know what they were doing. So I saved that to last, because probably I know, you're paying for the actors. You got them for an hour and a half, you're going to keep them for an hour and a half. But I think you need to be considerate of the actors, and to me it shows that you're perhaps not as prepared as you should be, and so those are my tips. Might get into trouble for that. So those are my 52 tips for producing a great radio spot. Now, if you'd like to have me do one for you, I'd love to do so. You can reach me at radiofilms.com. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a great radio commercial coming up.